Okay, so the title of the chapter is Mother Teresa versus Hitler, and I'm going to do a little review, help you fill in the sheets here. Sorry I didn't have them last time. So it'll help with the review. So we're looking at the moral law, if you're filling in the blanks. The moral law is our third argument for the existence of a theistic God. It's after the cosmological and teleological arguments, and it's not a scientific one like we did before. But I think it's neat to know this stuff. So every law has a lawgiver. A lawgiver. Okay. Learned in ancient history Hammurabi's law and different lawgivers throughout history. There is a moral law, which we're going to look at. There is a moral law. Therefore, there is a moral lawgiver. Okay? So if we have a moral law, then we must have a lawgiver, which is God. Our founding fathers realized this. Okay, they thought, as Thomas Jefferson wrote, the Declaration of Independence, nature's law is self-evident. You don't use reason to discover it, you just know it. Okay? Just yell if I'm missing one here or something. But our founding... there is a moral lawgiver. Giver. Okay? So founding fathers realized, self-evident. We just know it's there. Okay? In other words, everyone knows there are absolute moral obligations. An absolute is a blank. Moral obligation is something that is binding on all people at all times in all places. An absolute moral law implies an absolute moral lawgiver. So the blank there is absolute, just like truth. We talked about it's something binding true all times, all places. Okay, they want to have you believe there is no truth, and it just depends on the society and the customs of those people, and if they think it's okay, then it's okay, and you're in a lot of trouble when you start going down that road. Just like truth, there are absolute moral obligations. Implies a moral lawgiver. So we're looking at some things that prove that the moral law exists. First one there, number one, the moral law is undeniable. Undeniable. Okay. And relativists, everybody knows what a relativist is. Okay, somebody it's all relative, it's whatever you want, your opinion, it's all just like you like chocolate ice cream, vanilla, it's all relative. Whatever you like is true for you. That's kind of what a relativist is. And they make two primary truth claims. Number one is there is no absolute truth. And number two is there are no absolute moral values. And we've kind of looked at that before. What's the problem when we're talking about truth? What's the problem with that? There is no absolutes, or there is no absolute truth. Yes, you're absolutely sure that's true, okay? These are things just to help you go over in your mind, because you will come across people that will say these things, okay? I have heard people say these. Very smart people will say these, so it's good to have it rehearsed, what you're going to say. It's just simple. Ask questions. So are you absolutely sure that's true? You know, it's a simple question. If there really is no absolute truth, then their absolute claim that there is no absolute can't be true. True as a blank. You can see the relativist statement is irrational because it affirms exactly what he is trying to deny. Okay, he's trying to deny there's truth, but he's saying this is a truth, that there is no truth. Okay, it's irrational. That's really what you end up with when you try to deny God. Number two is our reactions help us discover the moral law. Right from wrong. Reactions. This is a good one because people will say, well, people don't live by it. Okay, people do whatever they please. Okay, it's not what people do, it's how they react when they've been wronged that shows you they believe it. The moralist story, if you really want to get relativists to admit it, all you need to do is treat them unfairly, is a blank. their reactions will reveal the moral law written on their hearts and minds. They will deny it all day long till you do something to them that they do not like. Okay? And then they are suddenly have a very finite sense of what's right and wrong, and they can nail it down. I deal with students and teenagers, and they will treat you however they want, but as soon as, they feel you did some slight little misstep, they're going to be indignant, okay? All right? I said, if I treated you like you treated me, you would be very angry, okay? You want to mistreat me, but then if I sneeze on my pen and pick it up to help you with math, you're going to be, that's going to be offensive, but you can lie about it. You can do all these things, and I won't go into the things, but that will offend them. They will, that's wrong, he mistreated me. Okay, so we have that same sense. We just keep it under wraps a little bit better, but they are very into justice. Any teenager will be upset any person will be upset if they're mistreated. So it's not how they act, it's how they react. Our reactions also indicate that relativism is ultimately unlivable. People may claim they are relativists, but they accept the morality of murder. But would they accept the morality of murder or rape if someone wanted to murder or rape them? Okay, of course not. Relativism contradicts our reactions and our common sense. Okay, you can't say, there's no right and wrong, murder's okay, and then if somebody did it to you, well, you can't get upset. We can't live under those conditions, okay? We would be very upset. It's just natural. It's inside of us. We know it's wrong. So you can say that, but you can't live in a world where everything's okay, all right? Nobody wants to live there. Nobody wants to be there. Relativism contradicts our reactions and our common sense. They will be outraged. They will be upset. Somebody lies to them, mistreats them. Okay? So the moral law is not the standard by which we treat others. It is nearly always the standard by which we expect others to treat us. So treat in both of those. Okay, you can look around and say, well, people don't act moral. Okay, yeah, of course they don't. We have a sin nature. Okay? It's not the way we treat others, it's the way we want to be treated. It does not describe how we actually behave, but rather it prescribes how we ought to behave. Okay? So it's important to understand that. This is really understanding human nature and understanding where we came from, undergirds everything, all our beliefs, whether it's political, anything is all by how you view man. And I'll say this, I've said this before, but Democrats, what do they believe? They believe, and I'm not saying every Democrat believes this, but in general, they believe man is born perfect. Okay, we're all born perfect, and then when we go off, it's because of what? Somebody else's fault, right? Society, your parents, your teachers, whatever it is, your people around you, and that's why you went off. So nothing's really your fault, okay? It's all somebody else's fault, okay? Blame everybody else. That's their view. We know what? As most Republicans are conservative in a sense, not all, but we believe, or Christians, I would say, would believe in what? Man's fallen, okay? We believe in sin nature, okay? That's why we put checks and balances on government, right? Because we're putting in men that we know have an evil nature. The more power you give, what's going to happen? More corruption. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's what our founding fathers had a Christian worldview. They said, limit government's necessary, but we better limit it, and checks and balances, because man is sinful, okay? And we're seeing the more power that government's consolidating, the more corruption. That's why you go to a communist country, what do they battle with? Corruption, okay? China, Russia, okay? Because they have absolute power, and that leads to corruption because of the nature of man, okay? So when a shooting happens, what does the one party blame? Society, the guns, They'll even make excuses for terrorists. Well, they're just mistreated, or they're just poor, and, that's why they're doing that. And I'm like, Osama bin Laden came from a rich, wealthy family. It wasn't poverty that led him to kill, thousands of Americans. That's their argument. There's an excuse for it, and it must have been somebody else. It must be America's fault he attacked us. We want to make excuses. Meanwhile, blame everybody but the person, okay? We know as conservatives, Christians, that it's the person, okay? Anyway, I had to get off on that, but this is important, is your basis of how your worldview and how you view everything, all these issues. So we're starting a new one here. Number 3, without the moral law, there would be no human rights. There would be no human rights. Let me get to my other one here. Okay. So the United States of America was established by the belief in the moral law, God-given human rights. Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence. We'll see if anybody knows these without me saying. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Okay, what are they saying? Everybody can see this, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain, what? Unalienable rights. Okay, we didn't get these from the government. We got them from God, our Creator. Unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers, okay, we got them from God, just powers from the consent of the governed. Why did the American Revolution work? And you study what happened to the French Revolution. That was a disaster, okay, an absolute disaster. It wasn't based on God and power, unalienable rights from God. They believed that the government was all powerful, and they tried to really do away with religion, and it just guillotine. We know get that from France, and just the slaughter, and it was just everybody turning on everybody. It was a nightmare, okay? But we realize that everything comes from God. We have a higher authority. They were the highest authority. What could they do? Put anybody to death they wanted, okay? Well, somebody made an accusation, we're just going to put them to death, until the one leader said, I've got a list of people that I'm going to put to death tomorrow, and everybody's like, well, I could be on that list, we better put him to death. It was just eating their own. It was terrible, because there's no higher authority, and our founding fathers realized that, and that's why this has lasted for so long, because it was founded on God. Notice the phrase, they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. In other words, the founding fathers believed the rights are God-given, and as such are universal and absolute. They are the rights of all people in all places at all times, regardless of their nationality or religion. If you think your rights come from the government, what can the government do? Take them away, okay? They have the power to give, they can take it away. Okay, we saw that during COVID, what the government can take away all our rights because they give us the right to do these things, and suddenly we don't have the right. Our founding fathers protected the right to what? Worship. And they came along and said, well, you can't worship anymore. Okay, they don't have the power to take away that right. Okay, it didn't come from them. Jefferson and the other founding fathers recognized there was a higher authority, the Creator, to whom they could appeal to establish objective moral grounds for their independence. Had they begun the declaration with, we hold these opinions as our own, okay, rather than self-evident truths, they wouldn't have expressed an objective moral justification for their declaration of independence. So it was a moral thing, okay? It simply would have been their opinion against King George. So the founders appealed to the Creator because they believed His moral law was the ultimate standard of right and wrong that could justify their cause. Okay? All right? They're appealing to the ultimate authority, the Creator. Their cause was to end the rule of King George in the American colonies. They were convinced that George's rule needed to be ended because he was violating the basic human rights of the colonies. Okay? So they said, we have human rights from God, and He's violating them, so we're rebelling. Okay? We're doing a revolution to get away. Not a godless revolution, but a revolution founded on God. And in the sense that founding fathers are in the same position the Allied countries were after World War II. I love military history. I love World War II. And the Nazi war criminals are brought to trial. The Nuremberg trials, they're called. They're convicted of what? violating basic human rights as defined by the moral law. And at the time we have the international law. Okay, that's every country recognizes, hey, these are basic rights, basic human rights that they have, this moral law. And this is the law that all people inherently understand, to which all nations are subject. If there is no international law that transcended, is the blank there, the laws of secular German government, then the Allies would have no grounds to condemn the Nazis. So transcended, no grounds to condemn the Nazis. What would they say? If there's no universal law, if there's no moral law, what would they say? Well, if that's right for Germany, the government did it, they can do whatever they write. It must be okay in their culture, right? How can we put them to death? Because, they think it's okay. We may think it's wrong, but, that's what some people take that view with abortion. Well, I think it's personally wrong, but you can do what you want. Okay, you're basically saying, well, I wouldn't kill the Jews, but if they want to, it's okay. Well, it's either wrong or it's right, and that's where we got the moral authority to put them on trial. The whole world put them on trial and said, you're guilty of breaking basic moral law here. In other words, we couldn't have said that the Nazis were absolutely wrong unless we knew what was absolutely right. But we do know they were absolutely wrong, so the moral law exists. Okay? All right? So number 4, without the moral law, we wouldn't know justice or injustice. Do you have extra handouts there? You want to come get a handout? I won't say your name over the internet here if I'm coming in late. No. Okay. Stay off the camera. Don't walk in the camera view. Okay, so without the moral law, we wouldn't know justice or injustice. Perhaps the most popular argument against the existence of God is the presence and persistence of evil in the world. If there really is a good, just God, why does he allow evil things to happen, right? You probably heard somebody say that. Who's heard somebody say that? Okay, this is a common argument. Why do bad things happen to good people? Okay? What answer would you give? That's good. Yep. I just preached a message on that, and that's a great answer. Okay? That's what I said. Yes, God gives us a free will. The highest value is love. We can't love without free will. We're not robots. You just don't program it. If you have the ability to love, you have the ability to what? Hate. Okay, you have free will, you have the ability to do good, you must have the ability to do evil. Okay, that's free will. That's a really good argument. Another way of looking at it, we're going to look at here. So atheists have long asserted it would be more logical to believe that this God doesn't exist than to explain how evil and God can coexist. So C.S. Lewis, everybody's familiar with, he did the Chronicles of Narnia, a famous author. Well, he was once such atheist. He believed that all the injustice in the world confirmed his atheism. That is, until he thought about how he knew the world was unjust. How do we know it's unjust? How do we know it's evil? How do we know it's wrong? This is what he said. He wrote, as an atheist, my argument against God was the universe seemed to be cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? This realization led Lewis out of atheism and ultimately to Christianity. Okay, that same argument is an argument for God. Okay? How do we know with bowling, how do we know what a good score is? We compare it to perfection. What's a perfect game? How close I come to a perfect game, right? Okay, I don't compare it to my wife, I'm better than her, okay. Well, and then you get somebody that's good. I was bowling, I know I told this story before, but I'm bowling and she bowls like a 75 and I can get 100, maybe 120, and I'm pretty proud of myself. And then I bowling against this guy who knew what he was doing and he's doing like 200, 250, and I'm like, I need to shift lanes. This guy's embarrassing me. I like bowling against my wife. She makes me look good, but this guy makes me look bad. Okay, how do we know what's good? By a standard of perfection. If there was no standard of this is good, then you wouldn't know. what's right or what's wrong. Lewis, like you and me, can only detect injustice as a blank because there's an unchanging standard of justice written in our hearts. Okay, you can't know what is evil unless you know what is good. So injustice is the first one, standard of justice written in our hearts. Okay, we can't know what is evil unless you know what is good. So you can't use that argument, there must be no God because there's evil. Well, isn't this just, if there's no God, then there's no evil, okay? This is just survival of the fittest, and you weren't fit enough, I'm sorry. Just evolution at work, okay? You're dead because you're inferior, there's no, you can justify anything, okay, without God, all right? That's how we know there's evil, because we have a standard of good. You can't know what is good unless there's an unchanging standard of good outside yourself. Outside yourself. Without the objective standard, any objection to evil is nothing more but your personal opinion. Okay? You can't put people on trial for war crimes if, they think it's okay, or I think it's bad. Well, who decides? We have to have a standard of good outside of ourselves, an ultimate standard that we're all relying on. Norm, the author, loves debating Jewish atheists because he's never met a Jewish person who believes the Holocaust was a matter of opinion. They all believe it was really wrong, regardless of what anyone thinks about it. During one such debate with a Jewish atheist, Norm asked his opponent, "On what grounds do you say the Holocaust was wrong?" He said this, because he doesn't believe in God. He can't say it's, murder is wrong. This is what he said, "By my own benign moral feeling." Okay? We can't say anything's right. We can't say anything's wrong, good or bad. If there is no God, there's no standard. And he's at least honest in saying it's just my opinion. Okay? What else could he say unless he was going to admit that there was an objective moral law? We would say, what? It goes against God. God said, don't murder. Murdered 6 million. It's really wrong. Okay? But that would mean admitting God. Okay? If he said there's a standard, a moral standard outside of us, outside of our own personal opinions, that would mean there's a lawgiver, and he doesn't want to admit that there's a God. He had no objective grounds to oppose the Holocaust. His objection carried no more weight than his own personal opinion. So those perpetrators of the Holocaust will say, I think it was good. Well, that's their opinion. Their opinion is just as valid as your opinion, right? You think it's bad, I think it's good? Okay, that's what we're saying. We're talking about preference, ice cream preferences, who's right and who's wrong. Well, we're never going to know, okay? We all know the moral status of the Holocaust is not just a matter of opinion. Your reaction to a comment on the Holocaust should give you a hint that there is something really wrong with murdering innocent people. It's tough to read, but I've read books, and it's just the pictures, it's just horrifying, okay? We know there's evil. After all, you don't have the same reaction to someone saying the meal was wonderful when he says the Holocaust was wonderful. Okay, we're going to say, get out of my house. I'm not going to listen to you. You'd walk away from that person. You intuitively know that someone's taste for food is not the same as his taste for evil. Okay, there's a difference. Somebody say, I like this food, I don't like the food, no big deal. You can't just go and say that's okay. That was a wonderful thing that happened. Okay, that's evil. There is a moral difference between a meal and murder. One is a mere preference, and the other one is a true injustice. Your reaction to those comments help you realize that. Okay, like we said before, how we react, when we're treated. If there was no moral law, then we wouldn't be able to detect evil or injustice of any kind. Without justice, injustice is meaningless. Okay, we can't, without God and His moral standard, which we know is there, you can't say anything's right or wrong. It's all just your opinion. And I've heard people, and they'll ask them, someone debating college kids, and they're there, and they don't believe in moral relatives, and they ask them point blank, and they say, do you think rape is wrong? And they'll say, well, in our culture, or I personally believe it's wrong. They can't admit that it's universally wrong in all cultures in all time. They can't say that. And that's sad that their worldview leads them to not even to say something that simple. We should all be like, yes, that's wrong. We know that. And I think that person deep down knows that, but they don't want to face the reality that there's a moral law from God that says it's wrong. And that's where false beliefs, when it's tested, will lead you. They can't say murder. They can't say rape is wrong. Well, it could be wrong. That's my opinion. I guarantee if it happened to a relative of theirs, they would think it's wrong no matter what country or what culture, no matter what time. Unless there's an unchanging standard of good, there is no such thing as objective evil. But since we all know that evil exists, then so does the moral law. Okay? Very few people honestly would say there is no evil. Okay? We know there's evil. How do we know there's evil? Because there's a standard of good. Where do we get that standard of good? The moral law from God. Number 5, without the moral law, there would be no way to measure moral differences. Measure is the blank there. Did I do better on these blanks than the last one? Okay. My wife hasn't spoken up. Usually she will. Everybody else will sit there and not fill them in. She'll tell me. When we evaluate the behavior of Mother Teresa against that of Hitler, we appeal to an absolute unchanging standard beyond both of them. The standard is the moral law. C.S. Lewis, another quote from him, put it this way: the moment you say that one set of moral ideas can be better than another, you are in fact measuring them both by a standard, saying that one of them conforms to that standard more nearly than the other. But the standard that measures two things is something different from either. You're in fact comparing them both with some real morality, admitting that there is such a thing as a real right, independent of what people think, and that some people's ideas get nearer to that real right than others. Or put it this way, if your moral ideas can be truer and those of the Nazis less true, there must be some real morality for them to be true about. Okay, how can we say one's better than the other? If you're saying one's better, you got to say there's a standard that you're comparing it to. If the moral law doesn't exist, there's no moral difference between the behavior of Mother Teresa and that of Hitler. Okay, do you realize where these views take you? When I handed out the paper and you saw that, you guys were like, Mother Teresa versus Hitler, like this is shocking, they're used as opposite ends of the spectrum, okay? But if you have that view, you can't say that. You can't say, likewise, statements like murder is evil, racism is wrong, you shouldn't abuse children, have no objective meaning. You can't say, well, why is that wrong? Who says? That's just your opinion, okay? They're just someone's opinion on par with chocolate tastes better than vanilla. In fact, without the moral law, simple terms such as good, bad, better, or worse would have no objective meaning when used in a moral sense, okay? All right, everybody understand you can use good and, for objects, but when it's used in a moral sense, we can't say that. Who's to say what's better, what's good, what's worse? But we know they do have meaning. For example, when we say society is getting better or society is getting worse, we are comparing that society to some moral standard beyond ourselves. The standard is the moral law that's written on our hearts. Okay, we know it's there, and God's given us that. We know it's, call it a conscience. We know what's right and wrong. In short, to believe in moral relativism is to argue that there are no real moral differences. There's a blank there. Okay, so you're going to say I'm a moral relativist. If you're an atheist, if you don't believe in God, you can't really say there are any differences between Mother Teresa and Hitler, freedom and slavery, equality and racism, love and hate, or life and murder. You can't say there's any difference. Why? Because you're a moral relativist. There's no right and wrong. There's no good or bad. You cannot be an atheist and use evil against God. Say there's no God because there's evil in the world. We all know that such conclusions are absurd, so moral relativism must be false. If moral relativism is false, then an objective moral law exists. So we're proving that there is a moral law. We know it deep down. Their arguments fall apart very quickly when you confront them with reality. Number 6, without the moral law, you wouldn't know what was right or wrong. Blanks are right and wrong. And we think, oh, I know what's right and wrong. Well, where'd you get that from? We get this sense of, we're in a Western culture based on Judeo-Christian values. When Alan Dershowitz, a self-described agnostic, debated Alan Keyes, who is Roman Catholic, on the subject of religion in the public square, Dershowitz asked by an audience member what makes something right. and I didn't look it up, but I think Dershowitz has actually become more conservative. If I've followed some things, he's changed. I don't know if he's become a Christian or anything, but he hasn't.
He's more to the right.
Yeah, he's become more. Yeah, reality's hitting him. So this is an older book, so I know he changed a lot of things, and he's been attacked by the left now because he's saying some conservative things. But Dershowitz praised the question, then asked, we know what evil is, we have seen it. As he cited obvious examples of evil, such as the Holocaust and the Crusades. I love how they throw the Crusades in there. I mean, I won't get into that, but study that. That's maybe I'll go over that. But I've heard some things. It was, the Muslims were taking over and they were reconquering, trying to get back the land that the Muslims had taken from the Christians and the Jews. And anyway, that's a great evil, was the Crusades. Then Dershowitz peered at his audience and raised his voice and loudly declared, "I don't know what's right. I know what's wrong." Okay? He then began to almost scold the audience, "But I have something else to tell you folks. You don't know what's right. The minute you think you know what's right, the minute you think you have the answer to what's right, you have lost a very precious aspect of growing and developing. I don't ever expect to know precisely what's right, but I expect to devote the rest of my life trying to find it out." With that, some of the audience applauded. Keyes was never given the opportunity to respond. If given the chance, he could have exposed the self-defeating nature of Dershowitz's argument. Okay, what's the problem with that argument? What? Yes, exactly. You can't know what's wrong unless you know what's right, okay? I'm just getting you guys to think a little bit, because you're in these situations and people say this stuff and that's not right. Well, what's the argument? How do you know what's wrong unless you know what's right? You cannot know that 5 is the wrong answer to 2 plus 2 unless you know what? The right answer, okay? You have to know the right answer, then you know everything else is wrong, okay? That's the only way you know what's wrong is if you have some idea of the right answer. In the same way, Dershowitz can't know what's morally wrong unless he has some idea what's morally right. During the debate, and this is where the hypocrisy comes in, Dershowitz had no problem railing against things that he thought were morally wrong, okay? So he says, you can't know what's right, okay? I know what's wrong. And then he's talking about anti-sodomy laws, anti-abortion laws, racism, slavery, mixing church and state. But in claiming certain are wrong, he was by default affirming certain things are right. Okay, do you get that? If you're against anti-abortion laws, what are you saying? Abortion is right. Didn't he just say you can't know what's right? We'll never know what's right. Nobody knows what's right. But he's saying, I know these things are right. So if you're against the anti-sodomy laws, what are you saying must be right? Okay, and that must be right. So it's hypocritical there. Every negative implies an affirmation. To say that restricting abortion is wrong, the negation, Dershowitz must know that women have a moral right to abortion, which is the affirmation. But without the moral law, Dershowitz can't justify that or any other moral position. It's just his opinion. Okay? It's also the height of arrogance to claim that no one in the audience knows what's right. Okay? Christians are often criticized for saying they have the truth. Here Dershowitz is stating that he has the truth, that no one has the truth. Okay? Do you get the false? You got to kind of bring it out a little bit and think about what he's saying. I know one thing to be true, that nobody has the truth, okay, except me. Okay, that's what he's saying. In order to know that no one has the truth, Dershowitz must have to know the truth himself. Okay, so it's a very smart guy. I think he's a Harvard law person, right? Okay, and they will get up there and make, basically, there is no truth. Okay, a Harvard law professor, that's basically what he's saying. And we laugh at that because even the teenagers, when I say that, they get the fallacy. He's probably thought this through a lot, and that's your worldview, is nobody knows the truth except me. Okay, that's a valuable argument there. Some relativists are famous for this kind of self-defeating arrogance. They claim there's no truth, but then make truth claims of their own. Okay? They claim they don't know what is right, but then claim their own political causes are right. And I've debated with people on other issues that say there are no absolutes. They think I'm wrong, so that must mean they think they're right and that there is truth on some of these issues. Okay? They deny the moral laws in one sentence and then assume it in the next. Okay, do you understand the problem? There is no moral law, but these things are wrong. Well, how do you know they're wrong? Okay, well, it's your opinion. All right, I'm probably gonna, I got 5 minutes. I'll do number 7 real quick. Without the moral law, there are no moral grounds for political or social dissent. Did I have those blanks there? Political liberals like Alan Dershowitz and many in Hollywood are famous for their moral opposition to war, anti-abortion laws, tax cuts, etc. I love those in Hollywood that think because they act that they are, we should all listen to their opinions on who to vote for. I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. I'm sorry. You're a good actor. You're good at pretending to be something you aren't, but I don't really care. You can sing. That's great. I don't really go to you for my political views here. The problem is that many of them are atheists who thereby have no objective moral grounds for the positions they vocally support. For if there's no moral law, then no position of any moral issue is objectively right or wrong, is the blank, including positions taken by atheists. So the atheists, they're going around saying, abortion is right. Okay, well, but there's no God, there's no moral. How do you know? What are you basing on that? It's just your opinion. Okay? Any moral issue is objectively right or wrong, including positions taken by atheists. They will argue and yell at you that you are wrong and they are right. Well, based on what? Without a moral law, there would be nothing objectively wrong with Christians or Muslims forcibly imposing their religion on atheists. How could they say that's wrong? There would be nothing wrong with outlawing atheism, confiscating the property of atheists. Okay, do you understand that? If they say there's no right and wrong, it's all relative, well, who's to say it's wrong for the government to do that? They don't have a leg to stand on. Without the moral law, atheists have no moral grounds to argue for their pet political issues. There is no right to an abortion or any other political belief because in a non-theistic world, there are no rights. Okay, think about that. Where do we get our rights from? God. Okay, that's why communism, when there is no God, it falls apart quick. Why do there are millions and millions and millions of people murdered under these regimes? Because you don't have the right to life. Okay, the God-given right to life. It's whatever the government wants to do, and that's really what happens, and that's where we're headed as a secular country. That's what happens when you take God out. They want to say it's oppressive, and we don't want a theistic society, and we're all going to be oppressed, and it's going to be like the that movie Handmaid's Tale. We're all going to be oppressed. Well, it's not what we're looking for, but it's certainly I've seen the end of the road when atheism comes in, and there's no moral relativism, and government gets to kill millions of people, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's kind of scary. Unless atheists claim that there is a God and that his moral law condones or commands these activities, then their positions are nothing more than their own subjective preferences. And no one is under any moral obligation to agree with mere preferences or to allow atheists to legislatively impose them on the rest of us. I'll say this. I was listening years ago. I read something similar about this, and WBEN, and they're debating an issue. I can't remember what it was. Whether it was casinos, gambling, or marijuana, or legalizing something. And then I'm just listening to it, and it's just what? It's people's opinions. They're going back and forth. That I'm like, this isn't the core of the issue. The core of the issue is the moral law. Is there a moral lawgiver that determines right and wrong? And people are saying, I think it's wrong. The next person is saying, I think it's right. We're not getting anywhere. Nobody has anything to base it on, whether it's because they don't believe in God or maybe they do, but they're not saying. But all these issues, it's just a matter of opinion. Every moral issue is just your opinion. It's like, okay, well, what do we do with that? Okay, and that's really what It happens when you listen to these talk shows and they're debating. It's just, well, my opinion is this. Well, my opinion is this. Okay? It doesn't get anywhere. So by rebelling against the moral law, atheists have undermined their grounds for rebelling against anything. In fact, without the moral law, no one has any objective grounds for being for or against anything. The other blank there is objective grounds. They're really cutting their own authority out, right? It's like a parent telling their kids, don't listen to authority. And what happens? You're the authority, okay? When you say there's no right or wrong, you can't get up there and say, this is right and this is wrong, right? You just cut out your authority and you can't say anything. No one has any objective grounds for being for or against. You can say, well, my opinion is this, but that's all you can say, okay? Last one, but since we all know that the issues involving life and liberty are more than mere preferences that involve real moral rights, then moral law exists. So we're going to leave it there, but just some arguments and just it's another proof for God, the moral law, which we know is self-evident as our founding fathers revealed, and it's a basis for everything. The laws and everything that we have is this conscience that God has given us, the moral law. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you. Dear Lord, we just thank you for all that you've done for us. Pray you bless these services. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.